Welcome, it is Mitch. I'm on YouTube. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel as we try to build this thing up. Packers getting set to take on the New Orleans Saints Monday Night Football. We'll have a final thoughts video later on in the week. The purpose and the intent of this video is to look at the NFC. We did this last week, but it was more centralized on the division and the NFC North. But to sort of zoom things out one layer further back and look at potential first-round wildcard matchups for Green Bay, who you would prefer them to match up with of the likely candidates for the Packers. And as I was combing over things, I noticed there is a scenario that exists, and it is a gut-wrenching one, where a 13-4 Green Bay Packers team could have the 6th seed. Think about that. It speaks volumes to how loaded the NFC North is. But if Green Bay were to beat the Saints, the Vikings, and the Bears, there's a possibility they could go 13-4 and end up with the 6th seed in the NFC, which is just crazy. But that's not the focus of today either. It's to look at likely possibilities, and let's call a spade a spade. The Packers are focused on the Saints. They're going to say they're focused on the Saints. They should be focused on the Saints. We're not on the team. We can look ahead a little bit. And Green Bay, according to every model, every metric, has a 99% chance or greater, 99.1, 99.2% chance to make the postseason. And it's pretty cut and dry for the Packers. If you beat the lowly New Orleans Saints on Monday Night Football, you clinch a playoff berth. You get a ticket to the dance. You just beat the Saints on Monday night, you're in. And so we can look ahead a little bit and try to forecast how things might shake out for the Packers and who we think they match up with better compared to other options. And so with 3 weeks left and Green Bay having a 99% chance to make the postseason, you beat New Orleans, you're in. I want to run with the notion today of, hey, let's say the Packers make the playoffs. Who is it you want to see on Wild Card Weekend? And really right now, if the playoffs started today, Green Bay would be the 6th seed, and they would head to Tampa Bay and take on Baker Mayfield and the Buccaneers, who right now are the 3 seed in the NFC, although the Packers, of course, have a better record. Tampa Bay will start there, since if the postseason started today, that would be the matchup. Tampa Bay's red hot. I've watched a few Buccaneers games this year, and one thing that jumps out is the resume for Tampa Bay. They've had a lot of really, really close losses. They lost to San Francisco by 3. They have 2 nail-biter losses to the Atlanta Falcons. If the Falcons and Tampa Bay finished tied in the NFC South, it would be Atlanta leapfrogging the Buccaneers. But right now, Tampa has the 1-game lead. It's a fairly lenient schedule. I think Tampa Bay has, I want to say, Dallas, New Orleans, Carolina left. I think those are the final 3 for the Buccaneers. You would think 2-1 at worst. 3-0 is a very, very strong possibility for Tampa Bay. And this is a Buccaneers team, when I say resume and how it speaks volumes, this is a Tampa Bay team that went on the road and beat the Detroit Lions early in the season. And then later in the season, past the midway point, yes, it was a loss, but they took Kansas City in Kansas City to overtime, and the Buccaneers had chances and opportunities to win that game. You know, if you look just at the record, you'd say, Tampa's 8-6, you know, Green Bay's 10-4 right now. Green Bay's playing really good. That'd be a cakewalk. Don't be fooled by that record. Tampa Bay's a very, very good team with a nice win at Detroit. Coulda, shoulda, woulda, but lost at Kansas City, and they are just finding their groove. You know, oftentimes they say the team that's playing the best football entering the postseason is the most dangerous, whether it's MLB or the NFL. I think NBA is a little bit different. Tampa Bay is playing some of its best football in the last couple of weeks. And if you look at last weekend for the Buccaneers, that was a matchup you go back and you circle and you say, okay, the Buccaneers appear to be very much so for real. Last week, Tampa Bay was on the road against the Chargers, an LA team that in its own right, first-year head coach Jim Harbaugh has developed sort of a program and instilled his traits as a head coach to his team. They want to suffocate you on defense. They want to run the ball. Justin Herbert has limited his turnovers massively this year. They don't have a lot of weapons in the passing game. Ladd McConkey out of Georgia, the rookie, has been sensational. Outside of that, the Chargers are a team that this offseason I would expect to add pieces, more of them around Herbert, but they rely on their run game. And it was J.K. Dobbins, and now it's more Gus Edwards, who struggled, but they rely on that defense. And entering last week, the Chargers were the top-ranked scoring defense in the NFL. Again, entering last week, the Chargers were the top-ranked scoring defense in the National Football League. Baker Mayfield and the Buccaneers went in, hung up 505 total yards, 40 points, in a 40-17 win over the Chargers in a game where I did go back and watch it because I didn't watch it live. It felt like that game was slipping through the grasp for Tampa Bay, and they were down 17-10, and it felt like, oh, the Chargers might be able to pull away in this game, and all of a sudden the Buccaneers hung up 30 unanswered points, and it was the Baker Mayfield Mike Evans show, and Tampa Bay won going away on the road against a good Chargers team that in all likelihood will be a playoff team in the AFC in a 40-17 win. So I think if it's not even box score hunting, if you're hunting the standings and you're looking at Tampa Bay, do not be fooled by the record. Look at the recent string of games. Look at Baker Mayfield having a career year for himself. This is the best version of Baker Mayfield that we've seen in the NFL, with multiple other pit stops, former number 1 overall pick to the Cleveland Browns, where quarterbacks go to have their careers croak. He started in Cleveland. I still say they gave up on him way too early to bring in Deshaun Watson. That's been a nightmare for the Browns. Now he's in Tampa Bay after another pit stop in between, a couple other pit stops in between, and he's flourishing. And this is the best version of Baker Mayfield. Now, I will say Packers offense, Tampa Bay defense, but it's a defense that was getting healthy until Antoine Winfield Jr. got hurt. I like that matchup for Green Bay. But if Green Bay goes on the road to Tampa Bay, as much as I like Jeff Hafley in that defense, Tampa Bay's offense is for real, and they have multiple options in that backfield. Bucky Irving and White's back there as well, and I'm missing someone. Is it Tucker? Sean Tucker, the former Syracuse running back? But it is a potent Tampa Bay offense. If Green Bay and the Buccaneers, and if the playoffs started today, that would be the first-round matchup on Wild Card Weekend. I think that game's a first 1 to 30 wins, or first defense to force a turnover or get a stop in the second half potentially wins that game. Tampa Bay is really, really good. It is Mitch. I am on YouTube. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Going over the potential options, first-round matchups, Wild Card Weekend. Again, we're looking down the road for Green Bay, but the potential path as the Packers have a 99% chance by every metric, every model to make the postseason. And really, there's only 2 teams right now that seem likely for the Packers. Seattle could certainly crawl back into that picture if the Rams slip up. The Rams play at the Jets this weekend. Who knows how that goes? And Atlanta could sneak back into the NFC South picture if Tampa Bay slips up in one of its last 3 games. But right now, it's Tampa Bay, who we just talked about, and it is the Los Angeles Rams. The Rams, sort of the 180 they've done after a 1-4 start to now get to 8-6, has been primarily based in a team that was just battered with injuries early on in the year, and now they're getting healthier and healthier. And wouldn't you know it, when you get starting caliber players back in your starting offensive group or your starting defensive group, you're going to play better football. Who would have known? And that's exactly what Sean McVay's group is doing. That win that Green Bay had over LA early in the year, great win for the Packers. You take them however you can get them, but wouldn't put too much stock into it for a couple of reasons. 1, it was very early on in the season. 2, the Rams did have a ton of injuries in that game. 3, the 2 big ones, Matt Stafford didn't have Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua. Like, imagine Jordan Love in a game not having, like, Jaden Reed and Romeo Doubs or Christian Watson and Tucker Kraft. Like, there's still options to go to for Love because the Packers have more depth. The Rams don't have a whole hell of a lot of depth. They got, like, Tutu Atwell, but they don't have a whole hell of a lot of depth at wide receiver, besides Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua, who are 2 really, really great wide receivers. He didn't have them in that game against Green Bay. Green Bay's defense did a very good job of pressuring Stafford, getting after him, making things difficult for Sean McVay's offense, and it was a good road win for the Packers. Cooper Kupp's healthy now. Puka Nacua's healthy now. The Rams they're on a roll. And Matt LaFleur, I know one number that would be brought up if it's Packers-Rams on Wild Card Weekend, LaFleur is 5-0 against Sean McVay. It feels like the Packers and Rams play every single season now. LaFleur is 5-0 against McVay when the 2 head coaches square off against one another. And again, this is not us getting ahead of ourselves. Let the Packers focus on the Saints. We can focus on the playoffs. And that's not saying I'm thinking about the Packers punting these last 3 games. You got to win one of them. I hope they win all 3 of them. I want revenge on the Vikings for the Packers for what Minnesota did back in, was it September, when they had a 28-0 lead at Lambeau Field and the Packers made a late rally, and it was far too late, but they did make it interesting at the end of the game. I don't want the Bears coming in here on Week 18 and beating the Packers, and the Bears ending their season, their pitiful season, with a win at Green Bay, snapping an 11-game win streak in the series for the Packers. I want the Packers to win all 3. But right now, who isn't pulling up the playoff machine on ESPN? Who isn't going through scenarios for the Packers or for their favorite team if they're in the hunt or if they've already clinched, saying, like, if this is how the cookie crumbles, this is where my team's going to be. If it goes this direction, here's where they're going to be. Everyone's doing it. And so why not talk about it? Because, again, the Packers will focus on the Saints. I'm doing my research and prep for videos down the road this week for the Saints as well. But the postseason's well within the grasp for the Packers. Again, win on Monday night and you're in. So it's fun to look ahead just a little bit. The Rams, to me, are scary for a lot of reasons. One, the big one, is their versatility. And when I say the Rams are scary because of their versatility, look at the last 2 weeks. The Rams are coming off a win on a short week on Thursday night against San Francisco. The final score of that game was 12-6. The Rams defense buckled down. It was a monsoon. It was pouring rain, but the Rams got the job done. They beat San Francisco on the road 12-6. What did they do the week before that? They beat Buffalo, the red-hot Buffalo Bills, who just beat Detroit last weekend. What was the score of that game? 44-42. The Rams have shown just in the last 2 weeks, we can go on the road, face a desperate 49ers team, just as desperate as we are. That was the thought process for LA. Both teams really trying to get back into the picture in the NFC West with a win. Whoever came out on top a week ago, it was the Rams in a slugfest. 12-6, just a grinded-out affair. The week prior to that, it was score as many points as possible. Our offense can't be stopped, but we can't stop Buffalo. They won 44-42. The Rams have a lot of versatility. And the key difference for them, outside of getting healthy, it ties into it because the offensive line has gotten healthy. The Rams have kept Stafford upright in the last few weeks. Stafford's, he's getting a little bit older, exiting the prime of his career, certainly. Has a ring now to put on his resume. Super Bowl win a couple years ago over Cincinnati. Stafford's getting up there. He's not nearly as mobile as he was in his early years in Detroit. First 5 games this year. Again, listen to this number. First 5 games this year, Matt Stafford was sacked 16 times. 5 games, 16 sacks. The last 10, so we're doubling it almost. Or we are doubling it. 12 sacks. First 5 games, 16 sacks. In its last 9 games, not 10, 12 sacks. The offensive line is playing better. The offensive line has gotten healthy. They're keeping Stafford upright. And when the offensive line's protecting him, and then, all of a sudden, Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua are back in the frame, it's a lethal offense. It is a lethal offense that just hung 44 on the Buffalo Bills a couple weeks ago. McVay's been there, done that. He's coached in 2 Super Bowls, won one of them. The weird thing is, the Matt LaFleur angle of this, with LaFleur being 5-0 against McVay, it almost worries me just because of the law of averages. But man, he's had McVay's number in the head-to-head matchups. He really has. And they did again this year. Even though it was a banged-up version of the Rams, it's never easy to win in the NFL, let alone win on the road. The Packers went into LA and beat the Rams earlier this year. Those, to me, are your 2 most likely candidates right now, as of this week, as of this moment for the Packers, Tampa Bay, and the LA Rams. And so I flip it back to you and say, out of those 2, who would you like to see more? And remember, within all of the discourse of who Green Bay could face or who we'd prefer to see them face, Packers are a really good damn team. The Packers are a really good team. And so I'm laying out Tampa Bay, I'm laying out the LA Rams, and I'm painting them in a very positive light because they're both teams that are getting hot at the right time, that are playing better football than they were a few weeks ago. But the Packers are really good. The Packers are the team that, You know, there's viral clips on Twitter of Rich Eisen and Colin Cowherd just this week both of them saying, that's the team you don't want to face in the NFC. They're not going to win the division. They're not going to get the 1 seed. They're not going to get the bye. They're going to be on the road. I wouldn't want to see the Green Bay Packers. Now, you have to live up to that if you're Green Bay, certainly. But the national pundits, the national voices are starting to realize, hey, Green Bay's playing a pretty damn good brand of football right now themselves. It's a team in Green Bay that appears to be hitting its stride. It's a team that will have a chance to right some wrongs against Minnesota in a couple of weeks. It's a team that should beat the Saints and should beat the Bears in 2 of the final 3 weeks. It's a team that is all of a sudden discovering a pass rush. Green Bay all of a sudden discovering a pass rush. It's a miracle. The key to that, in my opinion, and I'm open to listening to other theories, the key to me in all of that, with the pass rush all of a sudden getting hot, Rashawn Gary, number 52. I think I hit on it briefly in a video last week. He unlocks everything for the rest of the group up front. I love Kenny Clark, love Devontae Wyatt, love Kingsley Enagbare, love those edge rushers for Green Bay. The key to me, Bretton Cox, since getting run after the Preston Smith trade, getting more run on the field, getting a lot more run on the field. Green Bay's pass rush gets fully unlocked when Rashawn Gary gets going because it forces offenses to pay more attention to Gary, who in his career has shown glimpses of being an all-pro caliber pass rusher. Struggled mightily out of the gates this year, but when he is playing to that all-pro caliber level, offenses have to shift their focus, and when doing so, it frees up a guy like Enagbare, who had 2 sacks last week, like Devontae Wyatt, who had a beautiful spin move right up the middle, blew by an offensive lineman in that win for Green Bay, and collected a sack himself in Seattle. Edgerrin Cooper had a sack. Rashawn Gary is the key to that puzzle. Rashawn Gary has 4.5 sacks the last 6 games. I like repeating stats just so they get buried in your mind. Rashawn Gary has 4.5 sacks the last 6 games. He had 2 sacks the first 8 games. And if you want to look at QB pressures, 14 games this year. In the first 6, Rashawn Gary had 7 quarterback pressures. In the last 8 games, he has 17 QB pressures. 52 is the key to the puzzle. If 52 gets going, it unlocks everything else. Kingsley Enagbare is a great pass rusher in his own right. Kenny Clark has shown throughout his career he can get to a quarterback. Devontae Wyatt has shown glimpses. They're all capable of doing it themselves. But when 52 is the engine for that defensive front for Green Bay, and when 52 has that motor going, offenses have no other choice but to put more eyeballs on them, thus leading to opportunities for 55, for 97, and other guys throughout that defense for Green Bay. Hell, I'd love to throw Lucas Van Ness's name in that mix. He's been invisible most of the season. He's been a big disappointment. Not going to give up on him. First-round pick just last year, but expected a lot more out of Van Ness in his opportunities up to this point. Just haven't seen it. Haven't seen it at all. But Rashawn Gary is getting it going. And if the Packers, one of the big things, one of the glaring issues early on in the season was a lack of a pass rush. I'm telling you, if they get 52 going and it opens up other things for the defensive front, it adds such a critical layer to this defense. Xavier McKinney, who's had a marvelous all-pro season at safety for Green Bay, said after the win in Seattle, I'm slightly paraphrasing, but said he felt like the secondary didn't have to do much because of the pressure the defensive front was getting on Geno Smith and Sam Howell, who relieved the injured Geno Smith in the second half. And if that secondary can sit back and feast, if the defensive front's getting pressure on the opposing quarterback, leading to the quarterback having to make quicker decisions, more brash decisions, taking more risk, prone to more mistakes, this is a secondary that has some ball hawks, led by McKinney. Carrington Valentine, his first interception last week against Seattle. Edgerrin Cooper had an interception, should have had 2. McKinney started out of the gates hot in the interception department for Green Bay. They've got some guys who can be ball hawks and it's just one big domino effect. You get pressure on the quarterback, it speeds up their entire process, forces them to make quicker decisions, forces them to once in a while be like, well, I got to take this risk here because I don't have time. And when you've got Evan Williams and you've got Xavier McKinney and you've got Carrington Valentine and you've got hopefully Jair Alexander coming back in the mix and you've got hopefully Javon Bullard coming back into the mix and you've got Keyshawn Nixon, you've got some guys that can pick off some passes if quarterbacks are pressured more by the front for Green Bay. So I'm going to try to stay optimistic about that group. They looked really good against Seattle. They looked good against Houston earlier in the year. They looked incredible against an atrocious Tennessee Titans offensive line in week 3 was that. But we haven't seen it on a consistent basis. Now that Rashawn Gary's playing more consistently, and I think, what did I say? 4.5 sacks the last 6 games when he had 2 in the first 8 games. That's unlocking everything else for the Packers. That defensive front goes as 52 goes, in my opinion. Truly, truly believe that. And so whether it's Tampa Bay, L.A., Seattle gets back into the mix, or Atlanta, those look like the likely candidates for the Packers. And, man, the NFC is loaded, and it's wide open. The NFC is wide, wide open. I'd been saying most of the year in these videos, just talking to buddies, Detroit. I just thought they were such a wagon that and they were going to get the 1 seed, and they still can, certainly. They control their own destiny when it comes to getting that first-round bye. If Detroit wins its final 3 games, they are the 1 seed in the NFC, and they get the bye. And I just thought they were such a wagon that it'd be so hard to go into Detroit and knock them off, especially if they got the bye. Those injuries are piling up. The odds on the sports betting books are reflecting that Detroit has so many injuries to so many key players, and a lot of them are season-ending injuries. And David Montgomery, I think last I looked, it sounded like Dan Campbell said he was out for the year. Now he's trying to get a third opinion on his knee injury. And they lost another cornerback to a broken jaw. They lost McNeil, their defensive tackle. I think it was a torn ACL, out for the year. Aiden Hutchinson said he's on track to be back in the Super Bowl if they make it there, but he's not going to be back for the postseason run before that. And there's so many. They have like an entire starting defense worth of injuries. And it sucks for Detroit. But things are starting to even out a little bit in the NFC because of all those injuries for the Lions. It's wide open. I could see Philly winning the NFC, but they seem to have chemistry issues all over the place. I could see Detroit winning it, but they've got all these injuries. And at some point, you would think it catches up to a team. I could see Green Bay claiming the NFC. The Rams are getting hot. I don't know about Tampa and Minnesota. Minnesota's playing as good as anyone. I've said it throughout the year, I can't see Sam Darnold getting a team to the Super Bowl, especially if they have to go on the road. If they don't win the NFC North, you're talking about at least 2 road games, likely 3, just to get there. But they're playing incredible too. I will say the one thing about the Lions, despite all the injuries, you cannot count them out. And Packer fans should know best, because Packer fans will remember 2010, albeit a different scenario. Green Bay was not the 1 seed. They were not the favorites in the NFC entering the playoffs, but they won the Super Bowl. Green Bay did. And they won the Super Bowl with 15 players on injured reserve. Names including Mark Tauscher, Nick Barnett, Ryan Grancher, Michael Finley, Morgan Burnett, Brad Jones. Hell, Charles Woodson and Donald Driver got hurt in the Super Bowl and didn't return. 15 players on injured reserve for the Packers when they beat the Pittsburgh Steelers in Jerry World in the Super Bowl in 2010. It's possible. It's been done before. The Lions are certainly going with the rah-rah mentality, though, gather everyone up. We're going to stay motivated and confident. If you listen to anything Jared Goff or Dan Campbell have said just this week, after 3 more starters suffered apparent season-ending injuries, Detroit's not going to roll over. That's not their mentality, but it has become increasingly more difficult for them with 3 more potential starters being out for the rest of the season. To me, the NFC is wide open. Green Bay's playing a great brand of football. Beat New Orleans, punch your ticket to the dance, go slap around the Vikings in Minnesota, finish the year with a stamp win against the Bears. Don't give them any sort of juju going into the offseason. Pour and shower some dirt on that gravesite for the Bears in Week 18, and then roll into the playoffs, see how the chips fall. I like where the Packers are at right now. I will answer the question, too, as we close things out, because I just realized I haven't yet. If I had to choose between the Packers playing Tampa Bay and LA right now, as good as both teams are playing, I'd rather the Packers play Tampa Bay because I think Tampa Bay's defense, and they've looked good against good teams, I still think the Packers offense is just such a vibe right now, rolling so well, trusting the ground game to open up the passing game, that the Packers defense could force Baker into a couple of picks, maybe at least one. And as great of a year as Baker's had, the interception number's still not good for him. The touchdowns are great, the yards are great, the confidence is great, all that's great. I'd rather face Tampa Bay if I were Green Bay. If you want to fight me on it and say the Rams, I'm more than fine with that. I'm not, cementing in that status as like, oh my gosh, it'd be so much more easier to face Tampa Bay than LA. It's going to be tough regardless of who Green Bay faces. Beat the Saints on Monday night, punch your ticket, and go from there. It is Mitch. I am on YouTube. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Always appreciate all the support. We'll see you next time.